Questions. First, let me just say this committee passed a historic border security bill providing $38 billion in funding for the wall, technology, personnel. I've joined Chairman Goodlatte in his legislation to close legal loopholes. But I think before we get to that, I think you have to justify that need. It's important to look at the threats that we face from the southern border. Your predecessors, both General Kelly and Acting Secretary Duke, talked about transnational criminal organizations providing a potential means for transferring weapons of mass destruction to terrorists. There are reports today that this caravan is on its way to Tijuana. Can you tell us a little bit about the threats that we face as a nation and why border security is so important?
Yes, sir. So I think the way to think about it is any threat that we face as a nation, if it can get across our border, our adversaries will do all they can to bring it across the border. So what we look at is everything from drugs to the transnational criminal organizations you mentioned, to smugglers and traffickers who smuggle all kinds of illicit things, not just people, but weapons, potentially weapons of mass destruction, other illicit technology. They avoid our trade regulations, putting our economic prosperity at risk. And we see increasing violence on the border. I would also point out that we have seen ISIS in written materials encourage ISIS followers to cross our southwest border, given the loopholes that they also are aware of. So we have a multitude of threats. We have emerging threats, as you know. We're probably likely to talk about UAS at some point today, but UAS is yet another form of threat that we're beginning to see more and more at the southwest border.
Yeah, and I recall being briefed on ISIS sort of bragging about the ease with which it would take to bring a weapon of mass destruction into the United States. I have to take that seriously, as they appear to be warning us of their intentions. When we talk about closing legal loopholes, the first bill I ever filed in Congress 14 years ago was to end the catch and release program. And here we are 14 years later, still dealing with this problem. I'm very frustrated, as I know you are. Can you tell me why this is so important?
I can. So the way that I think about this is in terms of home security. If you have an alarm in your home and you catch a burglar and you call the police and the police come, and in fact it is an illegal entry into your home, but the police then tell you that they have absolutely no ability to detain or remove those criminals, and the criminals stay in your house, you would not tell me that is home security. That is what we face at the border. We stop people, we interdict them, but we do not have the authorities, given the loopholes in many cases, to detain and remove them. We are forced to release them back into the communities after they have committed crimes. We have eliminated the administrative use of catch and release, which was popular in the last administration. We do all we can to enforce the rules that you have passed, but given some of the court cases and some of the legal loopholes, we are unable to do that in all cases.
And I think to most Americans, they just don't understand that, how that could possibly, you can detain, but you can't deport them, and then they get released into our society in the United States. This so-called described caravan, as I understand it, may be already in Tijuana. In your opinion, if they cross into the United States, which is their full intention, what will you be able to do?
Well, I think we have made quite clear, first of all, the Attorney General has made quite clear, we have a zero tolerance for illegal entry, but we have advised in every way we possible that we are aware of to let those participating in the so-called caravan know that participating in a caravan does not give you any additional legal rights. If you illegally enter our country, you will be referred for prosecution. If you file a false asylum claim, you will be referred for prosecution. If you aid and abet or coach someone to break our laws, you also will be referred for prosecution. So we're very clear about this. We will enforce our laws. It's an unfortunate situation that there's a belief that by coming in groups, it affords you some sort of legal protection that is not otherwise afforded under our law.
My concern is with the legal loopholes, which is really Congress's role to act. Under Article 1, we have the authority under the Constitution to pass immigration laws. If we fail to act on these legal loopholes, my concern is they will be released. You'll have the same problem with this caravan. Once they come to the United States, they will be detained and then released into our society, and that is Congress to blame Madam Secretary, not you. And that's why it's imperative, I think, Congress act on this bill that we have before us. My final question has to do with aviation security. As you've received the threat briefings, I can say everyone on this committee has received the threat to our aviation sector, the briefing involving computer laptops and poisonous gases. I think I speak for everybody on the committee. We are very alarmed by this, and we want to do everything in our power to make sure the American people are protected on flights, both domestic and international. We appropriated in the omnibus $65 million to move this forward. We will complete that full appropriation in September for 300 CT machines so that your men and women can properly screen at airports to protect Americans from explosive devices that may not be seen today. My question is, how quickly can these machines be deployed? And then finally, I think the highest risk are the last point of departure airports, coming in from Istanbul and Cairo and Riyadh and places I've been to where the airport security is not as good as ours. And what is your plan to make sure this technology is also at those last point of departure airports?
As you said in your opening statement, sir, unfortunately, the terrorists continue to see this as a crown jewel, if you will, of attack vectors. We also remain very concerned about aviation security, and in particular, how quickly the adversary is advancing tactics and techniques and weaponry to bring down an airplane. So the CT machines, we thank you for your support. They are very critical in our ability to detect these emerging threats. As you know, we're testing the machines as well as the algorithms that go with them that enable us to detect these new threats this summer. We look forward to the appropriation in 2019 so that we can, in fact, cover down over the United States in terms of protecting Americans here. Last points of departure are another type of threat area that obviously a plane comes from a last point of departure to the United States. What we have done there is, you know, last year we substantially raised the bar in aviation security across the world. We have a tiered plan. We continue to work with countries to encourage them to adopt the CT technology. In exchange for that, we pull back on other requirements that we have levied on them. So we have tremendous outreach occurring. I met with my G7 security ministers Monday, Tuesday. We talked about this again. We talk about this almost in every way we can. But you're exactly right to highlight the threat, and we will continue to focus on it.
Well, thank you. I think it's one of the biggest threats that we face from the terrorists today. It is a spectacular event that they'd like to talk about, not a 1 to 2 man operation or a vehicle assault. It would be a major event that we want to do everything we can to work with you to make sure it never happens. So thank you for being here.